everyone. In just a second, I'm going to be talking to Cleeton about her book Next Year in Havana. Oh my gosh, guys, you see the cover of this book? You can see it up on the screen while I'm talking to her. I cannot wait to talk to her about this book. It is such a great book, and I learned so much about Cuba that I didn't know, and I am so happy that she agreed to talk to me. So everyone, here is Chanel.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited because I am speaking with author Chanel Cleeton, and we're going to be talking about her book. It came out in February. It's called Next Year in Havana, and I just want to thank you so much for talking about this book with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Ever since this book came out, I have been dying to read it. I love the cover so much, and everybody was posting on Instagram, like making pictures out of it, and I don't know if you've seen that, but they were just loving the cover, and I was like, I have to read this book. I have to read this book, and finally got to, and I was so happy. But, I mean, did you love the cover? I mean, I think it's so beautiful. I'm looking at it on my screen. Everybody's looking at it as we're talking because that's what's up on the screen. And it's just so beautiful.
Well, thank you. No, I was absolutely thrilled. I really lucked out. My publisher did such an amazing job. And when I opened my email from my editor and saw it, I just was absolutely thrilled. I fell in love. Definitely had like some tears in my eyes because it really just captured the spirit of the book so well. And also just like personally felt a lot like my style aesthetic. Like they used a lot of my favorite colors and it was just exactly what I wanted. And I didn't really, I think when you're an author, it's kind of hard sometimes to see the graphic design part of it. I have a hard time kind of conceptualizing what I would want for a cover. Mm-hmm. And they always ask me for feedback and I'll kind of give some ideas, but it's really great to have an art department that just can run with it and really take your vision and put it up in such a beautiful way. And I was just so thrilled that I don't think I could have come up with, an idea like that. But they really did such an amazing job.
Yeah, and I love that her face is like partially covered. It leaves this like mystery to it. And then I'm assuming that is like the coastline of Havana.
That's the Malecon, yeah. So that plays a big part in the novel, and it's kind of one of those iconic scenes of Cuba. And I love the juxtaposition of the historical dress at the top with the modern setting at the bottom, because it really kind of captured the two timelines that exist in the book and that duality between past and present that kind of goes throughout the story.
Yeah, and the artists that come up with these book covers, I thought that what they did with the colors was just amazing. With the teal and then the rose-colored dress, and I don't know. It like has that feel of Cuba and the colors that you see there, and the fact that it's like part of her dress, I don't know. So I just loved this cover, and like I said, everybody on Instagram was like, all my book reviewers were making pictures with this cover, and I love when they do that, and then it just makes you want to read it so much more. So I'm very grateful for them.
Yeah, no, I've loved seeing you. Every time I get tagged in one of those posts, I love to see it, and it's so cool to see the kind of creative photos that people come up with and the tablescapes that they set up, to go with the book. It's really so artistic, and I definitely don't have that much of an eye for those things, so I always appreciate so much seeing it in other people, and it's just been such a fun thing to get to be a part of.
Yeah, I always think that too. I'm like, I could do that. I have the book, and then I'm like, no, I can't. I have no idea. We'll just let people who are good at it do that part.
Yeah.
So, but to set this up for everyone, and we don't do any spoilers at all, so I'm not going to do that. But it's two timelines. There's the 1950s Cuba and then 2017. And what I loved about the timing for this for me was that I had just spoken with this guy named Tom Miller, and he is a Cuban historian. And I know, it's so crazy. I mean, he chased me down, okay? He found me somewhere, and he was like, I wrote this book about Cuba, and I want to be on your channel, and I want to talk to you. I was like, okay, I know nothing about Cuba. He's like, that's okay. I'll send you my books. Read them, and we'll talk. So I haven't posted the interview yet. It's coming up, and which is so, the timing of it is just amazing because he found me. And then, so I talked with him for a half an hour, and he actually went with Mariel Hemingway
Oh, wow.
to Cuba and got to hold the Nobel Prize that Ernest Hemingway had gotten.
That's incredible.
Is that just amazing? Like,
you know, like that's like a once in a lifetime, yes.
Yeah, and he told the whole story. I was like crying. I mean, it was because it was such a cool story, and the fact that she knew who he was and she brought him with, and you know, whatever. And then he said at the end she made him give it back, and he was like, okay. But anyway, so you know, fast forward my life a couple weeks, and I get to read this book and talk to you, and I feel like if I wouldn't have read his books, like as I'm reading your book, I'm like, yes, I know this.
Aww.
But it doesn't matter. Even if you know nothing about Cuba, your book was I love how you wove the history through it. And even before I looked anything up about you, because I read the book without looking too much up, you know, and when I knew your heart was in this book, I could feel it, you know, through it, you know, it's like one of those books where you can actually feel the author's heart in it. And I was like, this is very personal for her. And then, of course, I read it, and it is a very personal book for you. And so, you know, tell us about it, because it's like, you know, these two timelines, so they mean something to you. And I'd love to hear the story.
So my family came from Cuba in 1967. My dad and my grandparents came over to the United States, so they lived through the revolution and several years of the aftermath. And I always really grew up on their stories of Cuba. You know, it was one of those things where they came to the U.S. thinking it would be temporary and then ended up staying here, you know, the rest of their lives. And my dad started a family and, you know, everything kind of changed. And so Cuba was just always part of my daily life. My grandparents lived with us, and we ate Cuban food pretty much every day, and they would tell me stories. And it was just really a huge interest of mine, always with that personal connection. And so we were actually planning a family reunion to Cuba. It was about the summer of 2016, and it was when travel kind of started opening up. And there were about 60 of us in my grandmother's extended family that were thinking about going over. And in those discussions, my dad told me this story that I had actually never heard before, and it was of one of the nights before they left to come to the U.S. I guess everyone came over to my grandparents' house and buried their valuables in the backyard in like the dead of night. And it was a pretty common practice back then, because when you left the country, you really couldn't take, you know, hardly anything with you, and certainly nothing of value. And so people would bury them, you know, in their property. They would hide it in the walls of their homes, thinking that when they returned, you know, everything would come back to them. And so my dad told me the story, and as a writer, you know, as soon as I heard that, and the fact that I'd never heard it before, I was like, what would you put in a box like that? Like, if you were leaving under such a, you know, just stressful situation, what would you choose to preserve for the day that you would return? And it just stuck with me, that question, and I kept thinking about it. And that's really what kind of sparked the start of the story for me, was this idea of this box and the amount of hope that had to have gone into such an action of, you know, bearing things with that sense of surety that you would be returning, and also the sense of desperation that the people must have been feeling at that time. And so that really just kind of stuck with me, and I started thinking about who my characters would be. And my grandmother passed away about a decade ago, but we had a very close relationship. And so for me, it was kind of a natural thing to write a story of a granddaughter and her grandmother. And I loved the idea of sort of telling how the revolution is still ongoing for many families, how, you know, something that happened in 59 is still something that, you know, people are grappling with, and that the ramifications are felt throughout the different generations. And I wanted that connection for people who maybe aren't as familiar with Cuban history to kind of appreciate a little bit more how that event has had such an impact on Cubans and Cuban Americans. And so that's really what started the genesis of the story. And then I'm a huge pantser. I just kind of sit down and start writing. And so as soon as I got that idea, I was like, okay, let's see where this goes. And my characters just kind of took me, you know, on this big journey.
And I loved them so much. And as I was reading it, I just kept saying, please let her write another one. Please let this not be one novel. Please let this go on. I didn't want it to end at all. And then at the end of the book, I do find out that you are continuing to write this story from a different perspective, which I'm so happy about. But
Oh, thank you.
for us, and when I was talking to this man, I was like, I grew up here in the United States. I mean, I'm 53. Okay. So I've been through history. And I said to him, I'm so ashamed to say how little history I knew of Cuba. It's right there. Okay. It's like, and we were not taught except for anything other than communism and, Castro. That's all you got to know. Is that you don't get to go there, even though it's right there, and, it's communist. And, learning more about the history of it. And and now, like, I want to go, of course. But I was in Canada last year, and I was sitting next to somebody at a bar, and she was like, yeah, I just got back from Cuba. And I was like, what? You went to Cuba? And she's like, yeah, we all go to Cuba. I was like, I never knew anybody that went to Cuba. So I was like, you went to Cuba? Like, they get to go to Cuba, like it's not a big deal for Canadians. So I was, that's kind of when it gets sparked. Like, we have this beautiful island country off the coast of Florida, and we haven't been there, So
yeah.
hopefully soon. He said it's still a little difficult to get there, but hopefully it will be much easier in the near future. But did you say you did go there?
So we actually ended up not going, and that is part of what also went into the book for me, and really sparked the need to write it. Was, we were like in the process of deposits paid and making all these plans, and there's only a few members of sort of my grandparents' generation who are still left that were going to go back with us, and my grandfather just feels very, very strongly about it, and he was getting very upset when we were talking about this trip, that he just really didn't want us to go. And so it kind of turned into a big family conversation on, what it meant to him, what he experienced. And, ultimately my dad and I decided, out of respect to him, he's 95, that it just wasn't like the right time to go because, I think he still just has so much anger toward the regime. And he felt like going and supporting in any way was kind of, I don't want to say a betrayal, but I think a little bit. And so it was one of those things where, we kind of came to terms with the fact that it just wasn't the right time. I was really fortunate that I've had a lot of like extended family that have gone back and other people that I could talk to and like family friends to get some insight on that. And it is one of those things that's like number one on my bucket list. But, it's tough. It's definitely a complicated issue. And in working on this book and then speaking about the book, I've met with lots of different families in this country, and it's been really interesting to see how everyone's kind of grappled with that issue of, do you go back? Do you not go back? Sometimes it's a generational divide where those who left, feel very strongly that they don't want to go back. Some of them want to go back for like peace at the end of their lives. And just kind of interesting, like really how, I guess, not necessarily contentious, but how passionate of an issue it still is, to kind of see that. And, when you were talking about the Canadians going to Cuba, that's always one thing that's so kind of strange for me, being Cuban American, is that, I haven't been. And it's like I have this deep connection. My family has this deep connection. And yet, it's strange that, I'll meet someone from another country who's like, oh, we go all the time. And it is kind of this weird dichotomy in this sense of, are you still Cuban? How do you kind of relate to that part of your identity? And I really tried to flesh that out in the contemporary storyline with my heroine Marisol, who goes back and has those same issues of, I didn't grow up here, but I grew up on the history and the culture and the language and, all those parts of it. But does that make me less Cuban? So it was a good opportunity for me to kind of examine those identity issues and to think a little bit more about what it means, in terms of your heritage and your legacy.
Yeah, I know. I love that part about her. I mean, I love these characters. I loved Elisa and Marisol so much. I mean, which character did you enjoy writing the most?
I think it kind of varied throughout the book. Elisa's character was obviously, a very dramatic character to write, in the sense that she was living through the revolution. And so everything was very heightened because of the danger and the tumultuous nature of her timeline. So there was a lot of fun in that, just in the sense that there was a lot of urgency. And I felt like as a writer, I was kind of working against, you know, almost like a ticking clock that I knew was coming in her life that was going to change everything. I think with Marisol, it was definitely a very personal connection, and a lot of my own exploration about being Cuban and about the revolution kind of came through in her character. So I really did enjoy having that connection with her. So I think, you know, they were both great in their own ways. Like, there was something about each one that I really related to. Lisa reminded me a lot of my grandmother. And so that was nice to kind of feel like I had that connection as I was working on the book. You know, I kind of got to go through the Cuba that she always told me about in her stories. And so it was nice to kind of feel like that sense of nostalgia and that family connection.
I love that part. I have a grandmother that I was really close with. She lived with us growing up. You know, and she died back in 2000, and I walked into her, like, you know, the whole family was there. I walked in, and I walked right back out. I was like, I can't do this. Like, I couldn't do, you know, like, because I lived with her, and I was as close as a mom, you know, as close as you could get as, like, another mom, and I just couldn't do it, you know, and I look back, and I'm like, oh, maybe you should have just done it. But I don't know, whatever, you know, but I was kind of reliving that whenever Marisol would talk about their relationship. I was like, I know, I get it. Because not everybody gets that, to have that. That's a special relationship, I think. Yeah. You know, if you actually get to have a grandmother that you're that close to, you know, and she was like, all she wanted was to go to Cuba and, you know, put her ashes and, you know, like it was so important. I was like, I get that. I get why, because I think some people would be like, why is that so important? But I understood, like, for her, it meant everything. And, you know, to go that far and, you know, but I want to tell people about the romance part of this book, okay? So I read a lot of historical fiction, tons, right? And a lot of it has romance in it. You know, the people put that in. Sometimes it feels really forced. Like, oh, I'm going to have to, you know, I have this historical fiction. I've got to put in, you know, something. I got to have some kind of romantic story in here. Well, with you, okay, so basically there's two romantic stories going on. And I was so, like, it just, I don't know. I love a good romance, okay? And I was so into both of them. But then I read, like, when I went to do my research, I was like, you've written romance. Like, no wonder it wasn't, no wonder it was done so well, is because you've done that before. And it was, people are going to love that part. And, you know, because I love historical fiction, but like I said, it wasn't forced. Instead, I was just like so into that story along with the backdrop of whatever they were going through and the tension buildup of what they were going through in each story. It was just, I'm like, I have to read another book soon, and I'm just like, I just want to stay with this one for a little bit. Well, thank you. I'm not willing to give it up yet, so I will sit with it. So I mean, you must be thrilled. This book came out in February, like I said, and the reviews are just amazing, 5-star everywhere. You must be thrilled with, you know, how well it's done.
Thank you. No, I have been. I mean, it's been really wonderful, you know, just kind of every step of the way, from me pitching this idea to my agent and my editor, because like you said, I did write romance before, so this was a shift for me. And I've been with my publisher for a long time, and they were just really great about taking me in this new direction and just really, really supportive and excited about this idea. And then I really appreciated, you know, all of my readers that crossed over with me and were willing to give this a try, even though, you know, it was something different, and ended up falling in love with the characters. And then just all of the new, you know, readers, the historical fiction readers that I've met along the way and who have been so supportive. And there's this whole community, you know, that I wasn't a part of on the romance side. You know, I didn't have much exposure with historical fiction, and it's been so great to meet all of these wonderful readers as well. So it's been so much fun, and I have 2 more historical fiction books that I'm contracted for now that'll be coming out in 19 and 20. So it's been a great adventure. I mean, I'm really enjoying it. I love, you know, for me, I don't think I'll ever really write a book that doesn't have a love story in it, because I kind of feel like that's kind of the heart of so much of our lives. And so I love capturing that. And it's been fun to take, you know, that part of my writing that I've always been passionate about and take it in new directions.
And I feel like, as, you know, as a girl, like, my first books were Danielle Steele. Okay. And
Okay.
so, like those were my first grown-up books, I should say, not as a
Sure.
child, but, my first grown-up quote unquote books. And so, when you start off reading romance, I feel like not that I don't love a history book or, but I feel like I look for it. And when I find a really good romance book, it's like in me, it's like, I think that we all love to hear a good love story. It just makes us so much happier when we read a good love story. So,
Yeah.
and that's what, historical fiction, I love that this book taught me things I didn't know. It took me to a part of the world that I did not know a lot about. But to learn about that and to get the amazing love stories in there, it fit everything for me. So.
Oh, well, thank you. I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah, and I wanted to tell you, so at the end of the book, first of all, for book club people out there, she's got great questions at the end of this book. And you do bring up, and this isn't a spoiler, about standing at the southernmost tip at Key West.
Mm-hmm.
And I did. I've been there. And I was like, oh, that's right. In the 90s, I went down. There's a picture somewhere of me standing there. I don't know where it is. So I'm assuming you did too.
I did. Yes. Yeah, I grew up in Florida. Growing up in Florida, I was around, such a big Cuban population, and also that idea of this is just 90 miles away, and yet it feels like it's a little bit an eternity because you couldn't go, especially in the 90s. It was so hard. So yes, I have been and definitely stood in that spot, kind of looking out and thinking about my family, and I kind of knew the ending. Like I said, I'm usually a pantser, but I want to say about 25% of the way through, I wrote that final scene and kind of knew my ending, where I was going to be. So yeah, it was one of those things. The book really I wrote it pretty quickly, and everything just kind of came to me. And it was definitely a very personal and emotional book to write.
Yeah, that definitely came through. Okay, so Beatrice, and I don't even know if I'm saying that name right. I see it all over it. Can you say it for me?
So you could say Beatriz, which is like the Spanish way.
Okay.
I because I'm so used to just talking to, everyone about it, I just say Beatrice. But you can go either way. So.
I've just been seeing the name around so much. It's weird. Like all of a sudden, it's in my vibration. Like I'm seeing it everywhere, and I'm like, I don't even know if I'm saying it right. But that book comes out in 2019, and I can't wait. Can't wait.
Oh,
I was like, I wish it was this year, but I know you have to write. Like, I know you can't write that quickly.
She was so fun to work on, and it was one of those things where I wasn't planning on telling more stories about the family, and then as soon as I introduced her in Next Year in Havana, I had to stop writing that book to write the first chapter of her book, because she just was so strong in my mind, and I could just hear her character speaking and her thoughts and her frustration and her passion, and I had to get it down. So I took a break, wrote the first chapter, and then I was like, okay, I'll come back to this when I'm done, and went back to Next Year in Havana. But her book was so fun to write. It's finished, it's edited. I'm waiting on a cover, which I'm so excited to see what they come up with. I can't wait to see the two side by side. And we have a release date. I don't think I can share it yet, but it's early 2019. So we're very close.
Oh, good.
Yeah,
because I said later, and I was like, no. Well, you know what? When when you're ready, you know where to find me. I will definitely be one of your readers, and we can chat about it too, because I can't wait. But you just let me know. Just for everybody out there, I will have all of Chanel's links. I will have the Amazon link. You can just press on it, go right to Amazon, one click, buy it. And it's like a collector's item for me. I mean, when I see this cover, I'm like, I just want to keep this book. I mean, it's that beautiful. You'll just want to have it. So thank you so much, Chanel. And like I said, we can chat again. This doesn't have to be goodbye.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful. I really appreciate it.
Great. Thank you. We'll talk. Have a great day.
Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm back. And if you are watching this, that means you made it through our whole talk. We talked for a long time. She was so sweet. I loved her. Thank you so much, Chanel. And I cannot wait to see what she writes next. I can't wait for her next book. How about that? I cannot wait for her next book. She is such an amazing writer, and she was so incredibly sweet. I'm so happy that I got to talk to her. Anyway, guys, all of Chanel's links are going to be listed underneath here, and thank you so much, Chanel.